What up? What up? Back again. We got another deck tech here, you feel me? This one's with Narset Enlightened Exile. Very cool card. Very insane. This is also a tournament report video. Surprise, surprise. Alright, let's just drop right into it. Fuck all that bullshit. Hashtag never getting sponsored.
You're canceled, buddy.
This is a turbo, what I would like to call a turbo Underworld Breach deck. This deck is very solid at looking for its opening, so I was like, you know what? Let's just bring this to a tournament. Let's just give it the real test, because I've been playing it for a while. I've been playing it for like a month and a half or so. And it's a really good deck, honestly. It's just constantly looking for its opening. And it's a one-card combo with the card Traumatize, which is the namesake of the deck, Traumatize. Narset Traumatize. And then I got the the brain and the freeze emoji here, because it's, you know, you get it, brain freeze, traumatized. This guy's getting traumatized, but he's also doing a brain freeze kind of thing here. Hey, yo! But that's besides the point. We're here for Narset. Narset's a 1 blue, red, and white Jeskai human monk. It is a 3/4, and it has creatures you control have prowess, which then includes herself. But whenever Narset Enlightened Exile attacks, exile target non-creature dominant card with mana value less than Narset's power from the graveyard and copy it. You may cast a copy without paying its mana cost.
Jesus Christ.
And that's really cool, right? Because you can pump her up. She has prowess, so if you cast like a Mox Opal or a Mox Diamond, she'll pump up. She'll go to 4/5. And then you can cast something for lesser value. So maybe you see a Rhystic Study in the graveyard. If you cast your Mox Diamond and Narset's a 4/5, you can cast that Rhystic Study from your graveyard or an opponent's graveyard. I generally try to keep the curve under 3. Yeah, I would say under 3, because then the ask isn't too high for you casting anything out of your deck. There's the exception of Jace and Jace, both Jaces. One's a win condition, so you got Jace Wheeler of Mysteries, which is a win condition, and you got Jace Perfected Mind, which is also a tertiary win condition. Jace is actually like a 3-drop because it has a Phyrexian cost, so it's not that crazy. But if you do want to cast it off of Narset, you're going to have to pump her to a 5 so you can cast it for 4. So more about Narset's ability. If you do choose an opponent's card in the graveyard, say like you choose their Mystic Remore after they decided not to pay for it anymore, you can target it and then cast a copy of it. And the cool thing about the copy is that it's a copy, so if they leave the game or die, you still get to keep the Mystic Remore that you stole from that. Also, something to note is if you're trying to loop something, which you can't do with this commander, it will exile it. It exiles it on target, and then you cast a copy from exile. There aren't that many creatures. There's about 11 creatures in the deck. You got your DRC because this is a breach focused deck. Esper Sentinel, of course, because it's a good card. Heejin Crab. Heejin Crab is a 1 blue, 0/2 with landfalls. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, target player puts the top 3 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. This card's insane with Narset out because you can put a fetch into play, target yourself with the Heejin Crab, hold priority, search yourself for a land to dilute it so you don't mill your land by accident. And then when your extra land comes into play, you're gonna target yourself again, so you're gonna mill 6 cards, and then you're gonna go to Pound Town with Narset.
Pound Town, just left Pound Town.
Which then gives you basically 6 cards. It's kind of insane, right? Off of a land drop, you're gaining 6 cards because your graveyard is essentially your new hand. As you'll see with this deck, this pretty much the theme of the deck is you want to mill as many cards as you can to give yourself a new hand. We got Ragavan here, Dockside, of course, Gilded Drake. Gilded Drake's here in case somebody tries to steal Narset. which they will do because Narset's really powerful, very enticing, and of course they want to cast cards from everybody's graveyard. So yeah, I think protecting Narset with a Guild Drake is pretty cool. Of course, you got Grand Abolisher, Lavinia. This is some blue farm tech I took from Brian Koval. I think it's pretty solid because I think my idea behind it was that this is kind of this is like 2/3 of blue farm. This is just completely breach focused. There's no Thassa's Oracle or Tainted Pact, but if you take out Thassa's Oracle and Tainted Pact out of blue farm, you're gonna get this. This is the deck you're gonna get. Except your commanders don't synergize with your graveyard. They just draw you cards in blue farm. But Narset definitely synergizes with your graveyard as well as everybody else's graveyard. So, as I said about Hedron Crab, you can target your opponents. If you know they like Imperial Sealed, you can target your opponent with the Hedron Crab, and then you can swing with Narset. Maybe they tutor for breach, and you can take their breach and exile it, and then play it for yourself, and they're never gonna get it back, which is kind of crazy. But Lavinia is in here for the extra blue farm tech from Brian Koval. This is also a pseudo Grand Abolisher is what people call it. I've never used it as a stacks piece, but it gets kind of wonky towards the end of the game when people have free counter spells in hand and people are just tapping out, which is something I've been meaning to say to people is if you see a Lavinia on field and you have free counter spells in hand, don't tap out. That's what makes Lavinia bad. Don't tap out. If you know you can cast a spell to stop somebody from winning the game, do not tap out because they're going to have to use their free counter magic to interact with you if you know their mana is kind of tight. But either way, just don't tap out. Can't blame Lavinia for everything. That's one thing I'm going to tell you. You can't blame Lavinia for everything. You have to leave your mana untapped to use your counter magic and your interaction, because you know you're going to have to pay for it. Monastery Mentor is a card that I dropped in after stealing countless Nagilas. I stole a lot of Nagilas. And I realized that having a bunch of 1/1s was an excellent way to kind of close out the game, because if you make a bunch of 1/1s and then you're just pumping them by 1 or 2 each turn, and it just kills somebody very, very quickly, especially if they all have prowess. That's kind of insane. And Narset also gives them prowess, which is really insane because that definitely does stack on top of it. So if you cast a Mox Opal or a Mox Amber, while you have a bunch of 1/1s, then they become +2/+2. Now you have a bunch of 3/3s that are ready to swing. That's one way you can close out the game there. Some of the cool cards I got in here, we got Burning Quarry, 1 red. Each player draws 3 cards and discards 3 cards at random. For this deck, you don't care necessarily what you discard because you're going to be able to cast it again with Narset. Whatever you discard, maybe about like 70% of the deck, you can probably just play again. You got Faithful Suiting, of course, because, you know, like I said, there are cards in your graveyard. There's cards that you actually want in your graveyard. Why not trade them for something else that you can cast out of your hand for cheaper? Idyllic Tutor in here. It's just tutors for breach, honestly. So what you can do with Idyllic Tutor, this is part of the 1-card combo, I would say, but we'll get back to that later. But if you have Idyllic Tutor in your graveyard and you play anything, we're gonna go back to the Mox Opal. We're gonna cast the Mox Opal. Narset goes to 4, and then you can swing, cast your Idyllic Tutor, put your breach in hand, and then go ahead and cast your breach. And the cool thing about Narset is that if you do cast breach and it does get countered, it'll just go to the graveyard. You don't need a Sevinne's Reclamation. You can just cast a copy of your breach with Narset on your following turn. Wheel of Fortune, excellent card for this deck. Most of the time you're looking to wheel. There's no time twister. We're not twisting it up. We're just wheeling towards the graveyard. because that's where our second hand is, and that's how we're going to close out the game. Speaking of the graveyard, we got Traumatize. Traumatize is a 3 blue sorcery. Target player puts the top half of his or her library routed down into his or her graveyard. This card is very cool in this deck. This is a 1-card combo with Narset out. Narset will have access to any 1 card in your graveyard, mainly Breach. You have a 50-50 shot to hit your Breach with this card. So if you do get it, you'll just cast it, and then you're just gonna have access to half your library. If you don't hit it, like I said, we're gonna loop back to Idyllic Tutor. Idyllic Tutor's there, so you can cast the Idyllic Tutor and put your Breach in hand, and that's kind of just a safety precaution there to get your Breach in hand. I would recommend just casting the Sevinne's Reclamation instead of targeting your Breach if you get there, because you won't lose your Breach. You won't have to exile your Breach if you just cast the Sevinne's Reclamation, because it's going to exile itself anyway. You won't get the flashback cost because it's going to exile and you're making a copy from exile, so you can only choose 1 card. That is something to remember. I won't spend too much time on the instance. But one I'm particularly fond of is Stubborn Denial. 1 blue. Counter target non-creature spell unless its controller pays 1. Then it has a Ferocious ability. If you control a creature with power 4 or greater, counter that spell instead. I don't know if you noticed, but Narset is a 3/4. But it does have a prowess trigger once it goes on the stack. And then Stubborn Denial checks the power of your creatures when it resolves. So Narset will be a 4/5, and it will counter a non-creature spell for 1 blue. Very unique cards. Cards usually seen in Tasigur. That is my first love, my first cEDH love. JK, it's actually Leovold, but I tried to build a deck. The day before Leovold got banned, I was...
It's okay, bro. She wasn't worth it. Here's a fruit snack. Don't be crying over these hoes, man.
And then I had to move to Tasigur, and I was playing a ton of Stubborn Denial. A shit ton of Stubborn Denial, as you will. Just make a note that this only counters non-creatures. It seems like a really good card, I know, but it only counters non-creatures. Me and John from Gemstone Mine have had our fair shares of mistakenly saying, oh, this counters any spell. There's also some cantrips in here. I forgot. I usually try to stay away from cantrips. So we got Consider, which is a blue instant. Look at the top card of your library. You may put that card into your graveyard, which is just Surveil, an evergreen mechanic now. And it says draw a card. This card's kind of good because you essentially get 2 cards for the price of 1 at instant speed. 1 goes to your graveyard and 1 goes to your hand. If you like the card, it just goes to your hand, and you don't have to play it on your main phase or anything like that. Just play it at instant speed when you're feeling up to it. Yeah, it's a good card. Good card with Narset. Highly synergistic. Otherworldly Gaze is a really cool card that I really wanted to play for a really long time. It is a blue instant. Look at the top 3 cards of your library. So it has a Surveil, and it has Surveil 3, actually. I'm just going to cut right through that paragraph there. And then it has flashback for 1 and a blue. So this card is pretty cool. It just has the Surveil cost on it, and it just puts 3 cards in your graveyard. If you happen to have 3 mana available, just put 6 cards in your graveyard if you want. But you do have the option to put any number of them into your graveyard. So if you have 3 and you're like, ooh, wow, I really like this land, I really need this land, you can just keep that on top. If you have more mana, you can flash it back, keep that land on top, and put the other cards into your graveyard as well. This is a cool card. Shout out to Kian for putting this on the radar from Sadnaz. Shout out to Memo for actually confirming or actually validating me to put this in the deck. Chance of Glory is a 1 red and white. Creatures you control are indestructible, which that means is once you cast a spell, they become indestructible for the rest of the game. and take an extra turn after this one. At the beginning of that turn's end step, you lose the game. So your creatures just become indestructible at instant speed for 1 red and a white, and they're indestructible for the rest of the game, which is the end of your next turn. So that's a fair trade, honestly. So if you usually want to cast this if you're looking to win with Narset, and you can smell some you can smell a destruction spell for Narset, you can just give her indestructible and swing in protected and get your spell off. Delay Blast Fireball is a card that I found. It actually works the way you think it does, because once you cast it, it deals 2 damage to each opponent's creature and 2 damage to each opponent. Hits the graveyard, and if you want to cast it again, you can cast it again with Narset, because Narset will be a power 4 because you just cast a Delayed Fireball. The cool thing about Narset, it particularly says you can choose the card from the graveyard, and then you may cast a copy without paying its mana cost from exile. You make a copy of the card from exile. So, Delayed Blast Fireball particularly says, if this spell was cast from exile, it deals 5 damage to each opponent and each creature they control. So, when you make the copy from exile, then it can deal a total of 7 damage to each creature and each opponent. Cool cards, we got Rushing River. This is a card I actually really wanted to play for a while. Usually the cards usually when I want to play Rushing River, I want to play it in an ad nauseam list, but you know, the 2 in a blue is kind of unattractive for ad nauseum. But this card is a 2 in a blue. It has a kicker, just sacrifice a land. You can only play the kicker cost once, unless you have multi-kicker, which this card does not. Return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. If you pay the kicker cost, return another target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. A real saving grace for the deck. This deck's really just looking for its opening. It's just trying to get that breach off as quickly as possible. There's things like Drannith Magistrate out here, Soulless Jailer. You just need to get them off the field. Sometimes there's multiple Drannith Magistrates out, and you might want to get rid of both of them. Same thing with Thunderclap. This one hits Drannith Magistrate like a fucking rock. Hashtag never getting sponsored. This Thunderclap's a really good card. Definitely claps any Drannith Magistrate or any Dauthi Voidwalker that you want to hit. Doesn't really hit Soul's Jailer, but it's okay. We got other removal spells for that. But at the cost of being free, this will just hit any creature for 3 and also pumps your team for 1. It's a pretty good card. Alright, let's move on to artifacts. We got Portable Hold. This card's been popping up. This is some tech I found out from DJ Yavi Maya with him playing his Tameshi list. I feel like this card's pretty gas, so I just dropped it in. It's castable off of Narset with the low cost of 1. This gets rid of Drannith, gets rid of Soul's Jailer, like I said before. Yeah, it's a really decent card. I don't know why people aren't really playing this card. It's kind of insane. It's really quite efficient removal. We got Lightning Greaves. Usually, I'm my main culprit here with piloting this deck is making a shit ton of mana, making about like 6 or so mana to cast Narset on like turn 2 or turn 3. And I immediately follow up with Lightning Greaves, and then Narset gets buffed by 1 once this comes out, and then enters the battlefield. And for the low cost of 0, you can equip Narset with it, and then she can just start swinging. Lightning Greaves is an old casual card that I used to play a lot, and I'm excited to finally be playing this in this list, in the cEDH list. So we got Mesmeric Orb here. This is one of Ken's inclusions. Ken suggested this card, and I was like, wait a minute. No, this is going to feed everybody's breach. Why would we play this card? So I trusted Ken, and I gave it a shot. Mesmeric Orb is 2. Whenever a permanent becomes untapped, a permanent's controller mills a card. Like I said, your graveyard is your second hand in this deck. And the thing about Narset, this makes your turns even more dangerous to your opponents, because Narset will be casting one of their cards from their graveyards as well. But yeah, I definitely did have my doubts about this card. Sometimes they just have the breach, and that's okay. But I played a handful of games on this deck, and I haven't seen anybody capitalize off this Mesmeric Orb with their Underworld Breach. I've milled a couple Underworld Breaches, and I've cast opponents' Underworld Breaches, but I haven't seen them successfully cast an Underworld Breach into this Mesmeric Orb. Another cool card we're running in the deck is Wild Research. It's 2 in a red enchantment. It has an activated ability of 1 white. Search your library for an enchantment card and reveal that card. Put it into your hand and then discard a card at random from your hand and shuffle your library. So this is a gamble for an enchantment. On the same side, it is a 1 in a blue, and it says search your library for an instant and reveal that card and put it into your hand. So this card searches for Underworld Breach, it also searches for Brain Freeze. Those are the 2 cards that it can find easily. It also finds Risk Study, it finds Mystic Remora. I was running, what's that card called? Touch the Spirit Realm. I was running Touch the Spirit Realm, finds Touch the Spirit Realm. This card, well, Touch the Spirit Realm is actually a really good card for this deck because you can exile a creature with Touch the Spirit Realm's channel ability, and then you can go to your turn, maybe play a non-creature spell, and then swing with Narset, and then cast your Touch the Spirit Realm from the graveyard. It just does so much for Narset. It's super synergistic because usually this would be an unreliable tutor in any other deck, but Narset just pops it right back into play. So it's almost like a win-win. Regardless if you discard the card or not, you're going to be able to cast it whenever you want. I took this deck to a tournament in Manhattan, and I top 16 with this deck. I actually did cut Gitaxian Probe. I think it would cause a lot less headache for other players and myself, because before I was just running Gitaxian Probe and not Jace, Wheeler of Mysteries. So when I went to go win, they'd be like, go ahead, play it out. And I was like, all right, cool. I'll play it out. It's going to take a while. You sure? And they're like, yeah, just play it out. And then like guys people are just counting me to fuck it up. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to fuck it up. Like I got way too many cards in my graveyard now. Let's go. There was actually a time where I exiled my Brain Freeze, and in response to a board wipe that knocked out every single creature on board, there was an opposing Dothy Boardwalker, which I had to cast a Brain Freeze into to save my Narset, and so I could have it above a certain toughness to avoid the Meat Hook Massacre. So I had lost my Brain Freeze, and then I added Jace Perfected Mind as a pseudo Brain Freeze. This card is actually really cool because if you lose your Brain Freeze for some reason, it has the -X ability because it comes in with 5 loyalty. It says target player mills 3 times X cards. So what you can do is -5 Jace and then target yourself, and then you're going to mill 15 cards, which then again is kind of like Brain Freeze because you have LED, which then makes you 3 blue mana. Jace costs 2 blue and a Phyrexian, so you're gonna have to pay 2 life every single time, but it's essentially like a Brain Freeze. It's just, you're just gonna mill 15 cards. But yeah, I had to recover off of the back of Jace, and I would have been able to close out the game a little bit more easier if I could just Brain Freeze everybody out, but that was not the case, so I had to big math brain the Jace and Wheel of Fortune into my win like about 15 times or so or something like that. I don't know. It was a lot of times. I think it was about 8 times where I had to Wheel of Fortune and Jace and LED. I had to do that a lot, and I didn't go to combat because I knew that I would have access to everybody's graveyards, and then I swung with Narset and took somebody's mnemonic betrayal, and then I had access to everybody's decks essentially. And then I tried to cast the Thoracle, and then they had a Cephalid Coliseum, so I just winded it back and made sure that I had enough cards to not get milled out, which is kind of crazy. I had only like 7 cards in my library. I had actually 5 cards in my library, and if I milled 3 more, then I would probably die. I would die if they Cephalid Coliseum me. He's a good player. I really like that guy. He's really cool. He was playing Tim the Crom. He was cool as fuck. But yeah, I had to close it out with a Mnemonic Betrayal. My first game, actually, I just kind of wheeled into the nuts. I played a Dockside off of a past Wishclaw Talisman, and this is my first game of the day. Yeah, so I played a Dockside. Everybody had like a million rocks out. That was crazy. It was about turn 3. Got my Dockside out. Rushing Rivered it, which is key here. I Rushing Rivered my Dockside, sacrificed the land, and sacked it to target a Drannith Magistrate, like I said earlier. So I got extra mana, and I got to remove a Drannith Magistrate. Because my plan was just to cast Narset and just pass the turn and see what was going on there. But I wheeled into Brain Freeze, Intuition, and Underworld Breach. which is really insane. That was like kind of a cracked hand, I'm not gonna lie to you. I did get interacted with quite a few times by the Blue Farm player next to me. It was Captain Moral Support on Blue Farm. Shout out to him. He had Force of Will. I think Deflecting Swat. I think he had another kind of spell, but I had enough mana just enough mana to interact with him, which was kind of insane. But yeah, I essentially got there. Shout out to Accepted. Accepted was also on my pod, and then we ran into the issue again, and he's like, play it out. And I was like, you guys want to sit here for that? And they're like, yeah, let's sit here for it. And you know what? Played it out, won the game. That's the thing about me. You'll quickly learn that I goldfish maybe like 10 times a day with my decks. It's nothing but goldfishing for me. If you interact, so what? I planned for it. I goldfish so often, and that's something you should probably do yourselves. You should goldfish as many times as you can. Get used to your decks. Learn them inside and out. Wear it like a fucking coat. Your deck is your best friend. It is your weapon. It's your tool. You should learn it inside and out. There should never be a time where you're like, I don't know what's in my deck. I don't know what I have left in my deck. You should always know when you enter a tournament. Because that's going to be the thing that gets you out of hard situations. You can tell what's in your deck. There's been times where I didn't have everything I needed in my deck because everything got exiled or it was in my graveyard and I had no way to get it back. But knowing that helped me be more political in previous games before in tournaments. It helped me be more political because I could, kind of weasel my way around people and let them know, like, hey, like, I don't have anything. I can ask people to interact. I can tell them, like, hey, I don't have this in my deck anymore because it's exiled and things like that. I think all of my win conditions are gone, and you can tell them that, and because it's true. Knowing your own deck and goldfishing as often as you can with your deck is not nothing. Of course, real gameplay experience is essential, but learning your deck is core. You want to understand the core of your deck no matter what.